It's once again my honor and privilege to introduce our presenter for this evening, Katie Carlson. Katie serves as the Director of Wellness Initiatives for the Marion County Sheriff's Office in Indianapolis, Indiana. She is responsible for the implementation, execution, and oversight of the Marion County Sheriff's Office wellness programs. She also serves as the coordinator of the MCSO peer support team. Recently, Katie was honored with the Emerging Leader in Crisis Intervention Award from the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation for her work in peer support and holistic wellness for public safety personnel. Congratulations, Katie. Before assuming her current role, she served as the Public Information Officer for the Marion County Sheriff's Office for nearly 8.5 years. Katie Carlson is a certified yoga teacher through City Yoga in 2019. She is also a certified mindfulness teacher through the Engaged Mindfulness Institute. She received certification there in 2022. She teaches yoga and mindfulness meditation to law enforcement and public safety personnel, to inmates in the county's adult detention center, and to members of her Garfield Park community in Indianapolis. Carlson is a writer and frequent presenter on the topics of yoga, mindfulness, and public safety. Katie, welcome again. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much. And, this might be a little, hopefully I'll still be able to be the presenter, but John's going to run the PowerPoint for me today. It's my first out of 23. It's my first presentation with a PowerPoint. So this one will be a little bit different than the other ones. But just for a little bit of background, this presentation was something that I presented at the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation World Congress in May. And so I'm just excited to be able to share it with you tonight. It's really kind of a fairly simple math equation, CISM plus mindfulness. But for some people in this group, you might not know as much about CISM. When I presented at the conference, a lot of the people weren't as familiar with mindfulness. So can we go ahead and get started, John? Awesome. All right, so this is called Enhancing Critical Incident Stress Management Through Mindfulness Practices. You've already heard my bio for tonight, so I don't need to get back into that anymore. And I do want to say that while the Sheriff's Office is extremely supportive of my work when it comes to these presentations, my views do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sheriff's Office. This is something that I wanted to make sure I put in there from my old public information officer days, just to keep a little bit of separation between what could be my opinion and their stance. So when we talk about critical incident stress management, who's familiar with CISM? Could you raise your hand? Okay. So CISM was founded by George Everly and Jeffrey Mitchell of the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. This paragraph is a little bit long, and CISM is a kind of big topic, but so they describe it as a comprehensive, integrative, multi-component crisis intervention system, and that the interventions range from pre-crisis through the acute crisis phase into the post-crisis phase. It consists of interventions which may be applied to individuals, small functional groups, large groups, families, organizations, and even communities. And before I get started much more on this, I also want to point out that I am not a CISM trainer. I am a CISM student. Unlike with mindfulness, where I do have a certification, I'd love to become trained in CISM. Hopefully that'll happen before too long. However, so when it comes to this topic, in our community, he's not here tonight, but Kimball Richardson is just, renowned through the country as an incredible teacher in CISM. He and Lindy Holt both are, and they are who taught our peer support team at the Sheriff's Office. They're coming back next week to teach a few more people here, but so really all that I've learned about peer support, I've learned from them. So as that first paragraph mentioned, that there are a lot of different, CISM can be a lot of different things. It can be before a crisis, it can be during a crisis, it can be after a crisis, it can be with, families, individuals, or groups. And what I am talking about tonight is primarily the one-on-one individual crisis intervention model, which is called a SAFER. And so I'll go into the steps of a SAFER briefly. And so the first step is to stabilize. It says here, introduction, meet basic needs, mitigate acute stressors, and kind of confirm confidentiality. So in that step, you might say, do you need to use the bathroom? Do you need any water? Do you, peer support is protected language in the state of Indiana. Anything that you say here, unless you tell me that you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else, is confidential and protected by state law. And I've signed a confidentiality waiver confirming that and affirming that that there will be consequences if I do share what you say. And I take a lot of time in the course of my one-on-one debriefings to really go over that step. And, sometimes I, joke with people that I have friends I wish I could prosecute for sharing the things that they've shared about me. And so, it's kind of a nice level of confidentiality that we don't always have when it comes to sharing with friends at work, sharing with other people. So that's the first step. The second one is to acknowledge the crisis. And so in this step, you're essentially having the person walk you through everything that happened from beginning to end. And one of the most, in one that I did probably about 6 or 8 months ago, I say, what happened? And they're like, where do you want me to start? And I'm like, the beginning, tell me everything. So really that's the second step is creating, space and listening and allowing people active listening and sharing and allowing people to share whatever crisis or whatever experience that they've just had with you. And of course, in a SAFER can be, some are more serious, some can be more serious than others, and people will be in different levels of distress than others. So, the way that these conversations are going to play out, it's going to look a lot different every time. So the third step, facilitating understanding, is a normalization. This came up on our call earlier today quite a lot, saying, and sorry, John, Richard, and I had a call earlier today, and they were saying, normalizing whatever feeling, that whatever you're feeling, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's being able to, whether it's fear, to be able to say, this is a perfectly normal this is a very normal reaction to an abnormal event. So whatever you're feeling is normal. And it's also an opportunity to kind of hone in on the actual feelings. So in that first step, acknowledging the crisis, you go through the series of events, the facts. But in the second one, we start to go a little bit deeper into the feelings and the normalization of whatever feelings come up. So the fourth step, E, is where a lot of this this presentation tonight is really going to take place. It's my favorite step in these in the SAFER model, because I think it's the most hopeful of them. I think it's a really great time to be able to, inspire hope, to talk about the things that people like. So it's called Encourage Effective Coping. And we'll talk more about that later on, so I won't go very far into it. And then the last step is recovery or referral. And so if just having the opportunity to talk about an event and process the event is sufficient and people feel okay, then that would be recovery. But if somebody probably would be a candidate.
It's the Center for Public Safety Mindfulness.
Oh, someone's unmuted. So so a referral could be a referral to therapy or your EAP program or any sort of additional support. So when we talk about effective coping mechanisms, this is how they define it, but I don't feel like the way they define it is exactly how it comes up in conversation. But they talk about effective coping mechanisms as, meeting basic needs, liaison, or advocacy. I think this is a really funny term. Cathartic ventilation for venting. Social support information, so they provide, we can provide crisis information sheets, stress information sheets, stress management, problem solving, conflict resolution, cognitive reframing, spiritual needs, financial needs, reassurance, and hope. And so when we talk about effective coping mechanisms, we talk both about what is an effective coping mechanism and what we talk about what's not an effective coping mechanism. So at this point in time in a conversation, we'd say, well, just recognize, we're not saying that you shouldn't have a drink, but if you notice that you're drinking more than you might drink before, might have been drinking at a level before, that's something to be aware of. If you notice that you're making, eating food that's less healthy than normal, that's something to be aware of. So we talk about, what aren't necessarily the effective coping mechanisms without trying to get into any sort of shaming, still kind of keeping this level of normalization while still promoting an awareness. And then we also go into encouraging people to go to really provide themselves with the support that they need. Can you look at the next slide real quick? Not sure if I have a question on this one. Okay, I think I deleted, oh no, it's down here. So I'll talk a little bit about something on the previous slide. So why I love this E-step of a SAFER is because we have this opportunity to talk to people about the things that they really like to do. So when we talk about this slide about trauma movement, we go into and the body keeps the score. And he mentions how that the most important issue for traumatized people to find a sense of safety in their own bodies, and that only by getting in touch with your body, by connecting viscerally with yourself, can you regain a sense of who you are, your priorities, your values, and that trauma can make you feel like somebody else or like nobody. In order to overcome trauma, you need to get back in touch with your body and yourself. And so we're going to go a little bit deeper into this a little bit later, but there's a really definitive connection between processing trauma and that somatic experiencing of in our bodies. And we can talk about somatic experiencing as breath, but really when it comes to this sort of movement, there's so much that goes into, that can be considered mindfulness. Not only mindfulness as in mindful movement, but also really an effective coping mechanism and a way to help yourself process trauma. And or trauma, even if it's not trauma, trauma with a capital T, processing traumatic or stressful events, movement is a huge component of it. And so we get to have this conversation and we get to ask people, what do you like to do? What are some of your favorite physical activities? And so I ask you, if you could unmute for just a second and just shout out a couple of, one of the things you like to do to de-stress. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Walking.
Walking.
Dance.
Dance. Awesome.
Pretty much anything outdoors.
Yep.
Swim, bike, run.
All right. Thanks for several folks for sharing. For me, yoga is a really big one. Love biking, climbing is a new found love that has been incredibly helpful in helping me with stress, and that's just an extremely physical activity. And so, sometimes, occasionally, in the course of in a course of one of these one-on-one debriefings, people will tell me, watching movies or playing video games and stuff like that. And in those cases, I, really encourage them. I'm like, try to go on a walk. And it's not about, going out and getting exercise. It's not for the sake of, fitness or health necessarily, as just getting that fresh air and moving your body in a way that you don't ordinarily. I did one, as a lot of people will know from me regularly being on these calls, in the month of May, or at the beginning of May, we had a deputy, Tamika White, die by being mauled to death by a dog. And so our team ended up doing 18 of these one-on-one debriefings. And I talked to somebody who said, there was a while I was going and walking around a track that wasn't far from my house every day, and I don't know why I stopped. And I was like, you got to do it. Like you loved it. Like this is a really important time to be able to give yourself this step. And so that's what's nice. And Robert, I know for you, playing with your grandchildren is a big source of joy. And that's also a mindful movement. So, we get to kind of have a conversation and talk about almost prescribe, in a sense, some kind of movement that the person just loves, some kind of joyful movement. So it's not a matter of exercise, although it can be. Sometimes going to the gym is a frequent answer when I talk to deputies, when I do debriefings with deputies. The gym comes up a lot. And so all of those things, and I'll give an example at the end, but we say, this is what you've been through, what you're processing, what you're doing, what's happening right now. It is an extremely important time for you to make this time for yourself to do these activities that you love. It will help you feel better. And it's a fun conversation, and or not fun conversation, but it's a fun part of the conversation, because you get to know the people. A lot of the time, the folks that I work with are strangers to me. They're people who I haven't ever sometimes met before. And so you get to know a little bit about what brings them joy. And that's a very pleasant part of the process. Now, I think John Kabat-Zinn said he doesn't even like this definition of mindfulness so much, and it's one of the most popular. I used it. There was another definition that I think that either John or Vita had used not too long ago that I was trying really hard to find and was struggling with, but still using this definition. And I say this mostly among this group. John Kabat-Zinn refers to mindfulness as the awareness that arises by paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So for our folks who are new to mindfulness, this is a somewhat basic or common definition. But when I teach mindfulness, pretty much any time, whether I am working with deputies, detention deputies, or inmates, I refer to a book that I did a book report on for the Engaged Mindfulness Institute teacher training, which is the Clinician's Guide to Teaching Mindfulness by Christiane Wolf and Greg Serpa. And you can, they have the formal practice traditionally called meditation and the informal practice, which when I'm teaching it, I call it pretty much everything else in mindful living. And so as I'm teaching these practices, I often refer to them as two sides of the same coin. There's this formal practice that a lot of people think of as meditation, whether that's kind of sitting still with your eyes closed and not really doing anything, and then a general mindful living. So mindfulness practice is two things. And when we talk about those different aspects, those different types of joyful movement, I was just telling someone earlier today, and I climbed earlier today, there is nothing else I can think about when I climb. And I'm laughing at myself because I was kind of like, oh man, I kind of tweaked my arm earlier. And then I was like, yeah, Katie, you were swinging off of a wall with one arm. Like, what did your 40-year-old self, what did you think was going to happen? But still, I don't think about work. I don't think about stress. All I can think about is this wall in front of me. And it's very nice. So that ends up becoming a physical mindfulness practice. So going back to mindfulness as an effective coping mechanism, and back to Bessel van der Kolk, this quote came from the book Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga. And he says that people who are traumatized need to have physical and sensory experiences to unlock their bodies, activate effective fight-flight responses, tolerate their sensations, befriend their inner experiences, and cultivate new action patterns. And so this just kind of goes, this is just to reinforce this sense that when we've been through a crisis, when we've been through a traumatic event, being able to come back into our bodies, whatever that type of joyful movement is, and that's going to be different for all of us, is an extremely part of effective coping. I probably don't need to talk very much about this with this group, the autonomic nervous system. Obviously, the parasympathetic, the sympathetic nervous system is fight, flight, and freeze. The parasympathetic nervous system, nicknamed rest and digest. And as we go into these practices coming up here, a general goal or a general purpose for a lot of the breath work and mindfulness practices is to help our body be able to shift into this state of, shift into the parasympathetic nervous system, away from fight, flight, and freeze, and rest and digest. So we'll go into our breathwork practice from here. And this, again, for this group is not going to be anything that we haven't done before, but we'll go through a few different kinds of breathing techniques. And I just encourage you to take a comfortable position, one that feels uplifted, but still relaxed. And in this first type of breathing technique, it is called even breath. As I teach this one to people, I often nickname it remembering to breathe. So we're going to, and before I get started with any of this, and I'll talk a little bit more about trauma sensitive kind of practice later, but as we get into this, I just want to reinforce that any suggestion, any cue that I give is a suggestion. Even if I say breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4, I'm not telling you to breathe in for 4 or breathe out for 4. I am suggesting it. And if there is any time you want to back out of the practice, if it becomes uncomfortable for you, sometimes people may have be experiencing long COVID or a cold or something. So you are welcome to back out of these practices at any time. And you're also welcome to shift the practice. So if breathing in for 4 and out for 4 is uncomfortable, and in for 3, out for 3 is more comfortable for you, feel free to alter these techniques to best suit your body and your practice. So again, in this upright position, we'll start by taking an exhale and pushing all of the air out of our lungs. And then we'll start to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 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 and then return to your normal breath. So with just 4 or 5 big deep breaths in and out, can anyone feel anything? Can you raise your hand if you can notice a difference from how you felt before taking those breaths and after? All right, so there's that, even just those, sometimes a little bit of lightheadedness can accompany a few big breaths like that, especially if we haven't taken any big breaths that day. So this next practice is straw breathing. Straw breathing is my go-to for anytime I'm really feeling in a state of stress. And so when we do straw breathing, what we'll do is we'll breathe in for a count of 4, and then we'll breathe out for a count of 8. But as we breathe out, we'll breathe out through pursed lips, as if we're breathing out through a straw. So, and the reason why straw breathing is effective is because our inhales associated with upregulation or the sympathetic nervous system, and our exhales associated with downregulation in the parasympathetic nervous system. So as we double the length of the exhale, we really can start to move our body into the parasympathetic nervous system, and that I feel like that's why it's very effective for me. So, but we'll get an opportunity to try this. So one quick note, sometimes when you're doing straw breathing, the first time you are breathing out for a count of 8, you might feel like you run out of breath by the count of 6. That's something, or 5 even. That's something that's very normal. Usually by the next round or so, that will start to that pattern will start to feel a little bit more familiar or comfortable. But again, you have the opportunity, if that's not a comfortable breathing pattern for you, breathing in for 3 or out for 6, or some other number where the exhales extended is would be sufficient practice. So you're welcome to back out of this practice or change it in whatever way. So we'll start with another big exhale, pushing all of the air out of our lungs. And then we'll start to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and return to your normal breath. Would anyone be willing to jump in and share any maybe difference that you noticed from even breath to straw breathing, or share their experience with any sensations that arose with straw breathing?
Katie, I'll just mention that I have for some time now found myself spontaneously going to that in the middle of the day, or I could be driving a car and all of a sudden it's just something. It isn't like I plan a practice. I literally just transition into this. So it's a really powerful breathing practice that I have found that I just go to spontaneously quite frequently.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it reminds me of a little kind of quick story that I often tell when it comes to straw breathing. And there was a woman who I was teaching once, and she said, that's so funny because when I'm getting frustrated with my kids, I go and and it's just so true. So it's like our bodies know what they need, and we just never really traditionally learned this stuff in school. We didn't learn these ways to to regulate our own body, but it's a pretty natural, it's a fairly natural movement for self-regulation. So yeah, but my go-to, I'm sure it is for several of you too. So the next one we'll do is 4-7-8 breath. 4-7-8 breath comes with a couple caveats or warnings, I always say, which sounds very ominous, but 4-7-8 breath is not a great breath work technique to do if you're driving. It could make you a little bit dizzy. It's not a great breath work technique if you are on duty, if you might have to jump up and run at any point in time for some of the same reason. What it's an excellent breathing technique for is that period of time when you're done, you're either coming home from shift or you're at the end of your day, you're starting to turn on the TV and wind down, and you really have this opportunity to transition from wherever you were to to the kind of restful part of your day. And it's also an excellent breathing technique for trying to fall asleep at night if you're having any trouble sleeping. And so with this one, it's similar to straw breathing, where we'll breathe in for 4. This time we'll hold for a count of 7. We'll hold that breath in, and then we'll breathe out through pursed lips as if we're breathing out through the straw through the count for the count of 8, and then we'll come back to the 4 count inhale. So again, you're welcome to make this an adjustment if breathing in for 3, holding for 3, and out for 6 is something that feels better for you. That's great breath work technique to practice. So feel free to back out, or I'll create or to shift this to meet your own needs. But we'll start with another big exhale, pushing all the air out of our lungs. And then starting to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and return to your normal breath. Anyone feel a little bit more ready for a nap than you may have before that one? So yeah, these are 3 basic techniques. It's being able to see what feels the best for you, what you know, is the most supportive for you. And these are an opportunity to take one of these breathwork techniques and put it in your tool belt. So you know that it's there to access at any time. That's one of the things that's wonderful about our breath and the huge impact that it can have over the way that we feel in our body, is that it is it's accessible and simple, really. So we'll
Katie,
move on. Yes.
quick question. Have you ever had anybody comment or heard any commentary about the hold count, whether it's what's called an open hold or closed hold? Because in Tibetan yoga, they also use an open hold where you're inhaling and you do not close off the airway. You just hold that breath in an open state. And I never heard any clarity ever given about the hold. Is it open or closed? I just wonder if you ever heard any commentary about that.
No, another one of the techniques that's common with those that I actually don't like teaching that much. I think I teach it with deputies when I have that much time, is tactical breathing or box breathing. And so and the I think that the most negative feedback that I usually get on that one is just that sort of sense of panic sometimes that people can have at the bottom of the breath. But I haven't had a whole lot of feedback from the people who I teach, or I really haven't any of my teachers on that particular part of the breathing. All right, so from here, we're going to go into a meditation practice. So this is this sort of formal meditation practice. And in both meditation, in the formal practice and in the formal practice, or in the informal practice, the goal is the same. And that is to have an object of mindfulness. And for the most part, in our formal meditation practice, this is going to be the breath. And to notice when our mind has wandered away from our object of mindfulness, and without judgment, without, with a sense of kindness towards ourselves, to start to bring to bring our attention back to our breath in the formal practice, or whatever our object of mindfulness is. In this presentation, I don't go very far into the informal practice. But when I teach it in groups, I always do, and love the discussion around, what really matters to us. What are our objects of mindfulness in our daily life? And just like it can change in our practice, we can change from having our breath, or the sensation of coolness or warmth coming in through our nose or parted lips, or the breath moving through our body, just like we can change our object of mindfulness in our formal meditation practice. In our informal meditation practice, our object of mindfulness will change too, depending on what we're doing. And our objects of mindfulness can vary greatly. And there are a lot that are important, but essentially it's the things that matter the most in our lives. And so this is our own self-care, our families, our work. And I often, when I'm working with inmates, saying, it doesn't have to be your dream job, but to be able to, provide for yourself, and to buy, pay your bills, and to, provide these kinds of yourself with these basic needs, plus, being able to pay attention at where, help you from getting hurt. It'll help you from, so there are a lot of reasons why, but the other day I was teaching this to a bunch of, kind of friends and peers of mine who are all kind of fellow workaholics, and they were almost embarrassed to admit that their work was something really important in their life. And it's like, no, It totally is, especially for these hours that we're there and we're getting paid for it. Like that's a great object of mindfulness. And when you're at home with your kids, then your kids or your spouse or, yourself or your hobbies or your connection to, God or a higher power, your nutrition, so many different aspects. The object of mindfulness can shift, but where it's important here, when we come back to that sense of giving ourselves what we need, and this sense of incorporating joyful movement into our life, going back to that example of, I was walking around the track and I really enjoyed that, but I stopped and I don't know why. This same goal of noticing when we've wandered away and coming back to the goal applies. And as John has said in many of these, in many of our meditations, this every single time, it doesn't matter if your mind wanders 5 times in 5 minutes or 100 times in 5 minutes, every single time you notice that your mind has wandered and you can bring it back, it's like doing a rep. And so when you notice that you have wandered in your daily life away from something that's important to you, whatever that is, you have this endless opportunity to bring our attention back to what really matters. That there is we always have the opportunity to come back to our object of mindfulness and the things that matter in our lives. And so that's where the goal is the same in the formal and the informal practice. So we will do just a pretty quick mindfulness practice. And so the recommendation again is to take a seat that feels both uplifted and comfortable. You have the option to keep your eyes open. If you do that, the recommendation is to cast your gaze down or away from a screen. You can also allow your eyes to close. Your hands can fall wherever they feel the most comfortable. And we'll just begin by noticing our breath. And noticing our breath might mean something different to every person. But the recommendation here is to begin by noticing the sense of coolness as the breath comes in through your nose and your parted lips, or your parted lips, and a sensation of warmth as the breath leaves your body. And these sensations of coolness as the breath comes in and warmth as the breath leaves are the first object in this practice. And so we just allow our mind to settle and notice these sensations with each inhale and exhale. And we may have already noticed our mind wander, and if that has, that's totally normal. We just gently and with kindness towards ourselves bring our attention back to the sensation of coolness as the breath comes in, and warmth as the breath leaves. From here, we'll take a more expansive view of the breath. And so we still notice this sense of coolness as the breath comes in through our nose or parted lips, but we may also notice the sense of coolness as the breath hits the back of our throat. We start to feel this sense of expansion in our lungs and our chest and our rib cage with each inhale, and the contraction in our lungs, chest, and rib cage with each exhale. And so this full body of the breath, from the point where it enters our body to the point where our lungs are full, where it leaves our body, and that moment between breaths where our lungs are empty before we fill them up again. This full body of the breath is the new recommended object of mindfulness. So just paying attention to our breath, the full breath, and the sensations associated with it. And again, we might notice that our mind wanders, and that's totally normal if it does. We just bring our attention back to the breath. And there are some phrases that we can use to help us keep our attention with the breath. The first of these is to say to ourselves silently, this is what it feels like to breathe in, and this is what it feels like to breathe out. And these phrases can invite a sense of curiosity about the breath and the sensations that we're feeling in our body. And we can allow ourselves to become curious about these sensations. What does it feel like to breathe in? What can we notice? Is there something about our inhale or exhale that we haven't noticed before or haven't noticed in a long time? Another phrase that can be helpful is to say that right now I'm breathing in. And right now I'm breathing out. And so for the next minute or so, I'm going to drop any instruction and just invite you to notice your breath in a way that feels comfortable for you. And so maybe that's the sensation of coolness or warmth. Maybe it's the full body of the breath. Maybe it's using one of these phrases. This is what it feels like to breathe in, or right now I'm breathing out. Using something that helps you bring your mind back to your breath when you've noticed it's wandered. So we'll start to close this practice, and I'll invite you to close, if it's comfortable, by taking a big breath in, lifting your shoulders up to your ears. Taking a big breath out and breathing out with a sigh. If your eyes are closed, start to bring them open, to give yourself any movement that might feel good. And or to ask some questions about that practice, but I'm gonna hustle through these next few slides. This is yeah. Okay, so I want to give a few examples about the way that this has worked in the sheriff's office, these different types of breathing techniques in the course of one-on-one debriefings. One is, there was an individual and he was Muslim, and, part of his community was helping to prepare bodies for burial, I think. And he had done this for somebody who had been shot point blank. And I mean, just very, very gruesome body to be helping with as a part of, his faith. Additionally, he had seen the killer in jail. And so he had been really struggling not only with with visions and flashbacks, essentially of the body, but also of the face of the person who had done it. And we talked, and I, kind of said, what do you like to do? And he was like, I like to swim. And I was like, you gotta get in a pool, man. Like, I mean, whatever you do, you know, how soon can you get in and do some laps? And he was like, I think I can go tomorrow. And so we did that. We also did these breathing techniques. He hadn't been sleeping at all. And 4-7-8 breath. He had done at night. So he swam. He did 4-7-8 breath. Next time I talked to him, he said, huge difference. I mean, I started sleeping again, and I've like it, you know, it really helped do that. I mean, which just, you know, brings chills. I mean, it was really wonderful feedback. Another person who I'd worked with had a family history of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And so anytime she was experiencing, you know, she had events that were going on in her life, but when she was experiencing what in the mindfulness community we might call monkey mind, you know, and an inability, you know, feeling unable to concentrate, she had this extra layer of fear that it was bipolar or schizophrenia setting in, which just was terrifying. And we did straw breathing, and she started crying during straw breathing because it's the first time she had ever regulated her own body. And she just, didn't know that she had the ability to change the way that she felt through her breath. And, you know, one of the other things I will sometimes, you know, joke around or pick on myself at work, you know, for talking about mindfulness all the time, but it really does make a difference at our agency talking about it, because I have deputies who call me and will say, can you do a meditation with me? And we'll do a debriefing followed by a meditation. And so the familiarity with this, you know, not making things words like mindfulness, you know, not making these scary words for public safety or law enforcement, because they're not. If we're normalizing these words and these experiences and, you know, providing them to people, I'm getting requests for them in the course, multiple times in the course of these debriefings. And I think all three of these examples are extremely powerful. Want to talk just a little bit about trauma-informed mindfulness. I'm not going to read any of this, but, you know, essentially what's really important and what I did during our practice was let you know that you could back out of it at any point in time, that you could change it, that you don't have to do this, that you have your own bodily autonomy, and so on. And so let's go to the next one that's got a little bit more juice. Okay, so when talking about CISM and mindfulness practice, you know, when it won't help is probably a strong term, but going back to this kind of trauma sensitive practice, you know, offering it and then, but forcing it on anybody is horrible idea, or you know, strongly suggesting it. So, you know, that's why I say when it's not wanted. In another case, I talked to somebody, I kind of got through all of those steps of the SAFER, and then I started talking to them about self-care, and they said, Katie, I'm an Army veteran. I've been here for 15 years. I know how to take care of myself. So in that case, you know, it really wasn't needed. I think you have to be careful in cases of severe trauma for reasons that we've kind of read about in different mindfulness practices or in some different mindfulness studies. And in group settings, I wouldn't do these. And in fact, it came up again earlier today. CISM in groups is kind of questionable. You know, people sometimes aren't as certain about the efficacy of doing these kinds of debriefings in groups, but I definitely wouldn't probably introduce some kind of breathwork technique, because it really doesn't, you know, it could add pressure to somebody to feel like they have to do it when they don't want to. So like only in some circumstances where you say, if you don't want to go, if you know, I'm going to offer this if you want to stay, but you're free to go, you know, at the very end, maybe something like that, but I wouldn't want to put anybody feeling pressure. Okay, I also have done, we practice mindfulness as a team. People who are providing CISM take on, and I've had a lot of firsthand experience. We take on a lot of secondary trauma. We can take on a lot of stress from the people that we are helping and supporting. And so it's helpful to have a mindfulness or breathing practice for our team members and to practice it as a team to remind the folks that we can't pour from an empty cup, and to stay aware of our own level of our own needs. So my main point is that, using mindful breathing techniques can be really helpful in the course of a safer, using this sort of mindful movement can be a really, and really strongly encouraging it can be a really helpful part of effective coping after a stressful or traumatic event. And this can also be something that can be very helpful for a team to practice to, walk the walk. And when I presented this in Baltimore at the ICISF, I had this little shout out to our group here and a code, and several people signed up for it at a time. So that's all I've got here. I left it on there though, just so you could see it. So I know I'm at our 9 o'clock time. This was a hour-long presentation and probably went into something else, but if we've got a few minutes, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to, or comments, I'm happy to take those.
I just want to thank you for the presentation. And one of the things that always touches me, and I thought was beautiful that you added it, and this was the firsthand stories of transformation when you're working with people is just so rich. So thank you for putting that in there, and thank you for the whole presentation.
Thank you. I love those. I don't think it even is the same unless you explain that, how it works in practice. And so thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. That was great. It was very thorough with a lot of information. I want to just touch in with Richard's comment earlier on and tie it in with your two sides of the coin, and I can only imagine Richard has been training formally straw breathing, as everybody in the screen has trained straw breathing formally, or whatever your go-to breathing is. I think Sue's like a proponent of box breathing, but people have the ones that they work with. And as you train it formally, it just kind of comes up. It comes up when it's needed. And so thank you. Amazing work to be able to bring this in and train this to folks who are in crisis, or who are potentially really in need of some way to get through it, to work through it.
For me, it's exciting having gone through the training with you when the Sheriff's Office put the first cohort through MBWR, just to see the development and the impact of your leadership, and knowing that a number of the people who went through the training initially, some of the key people are still part of the peer support, and building on what was started with the class. And I just think you provide a tremendous resource to the Sheriff's Office, and are really an inspiration for a lot of folks there. And you've really been able to, I think, become part of that community, even though you're not a sworn deputy, even though you don't wear a uniform and all that. And I think that's a credit to your ability to communicate and show empathy and compassion and concern. So great work.
Thank you. I'm lucky. My office is down by our cafe, and everyone who's working in the jail. So I have kind of, when I was the PIO, I always worked with the very, very top, and then now I get to work with everybody else, and it's nice. I have I have a eye contact and hello rule, that I basically greet every single person, that I don't make them look at me if they're on their phone or something. But if I make eye contact with somebody, I say hello. And I'll say about our team, gosh, our team is just incredible, such an incredible group of people. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary, and as a part of our first year, we did a survey to kind of gauge people's comfortability coming to our team, their comfortability with our confidentiality policies. And I was expecting a bell curve, and really was kind of blown away by how sweet and kind and the responses were. There was definitely some that were remain skeptical, but it was very affirming.
All right, Katie. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here.